Hi guys, so I had this idea that I wanted to share with you. Now that HPI seems to be pulling back out of failure thanks to being purchased by Ripmax, and the venture is going to be a reality this summer, I figured that instead of chasing after all the thoughts on what the venture is going to be, how durable, how detailed, how capable, etc., why not go back to an older vehicle that HPI created and still manufactures, which really helped crawling, and by extension scalers themselves, get so big in this market in the first place. If you aren't aware of what happened with HPI over the past few years, you can search the various RC forums or news sites and just search HPI. But without further ado, I give you the grandfather of the venture, the Wheelie King. What we're going to do is make one into a scaler so that it can be run at scale events that require a ladder or twin rail chassis like this one. So this one is obviously more of a crawler king now than a Wheelie King, but the only modifications at this point are the links, right here, the link mounts, the lockers, and an axle mounted servo up front. Everything else is stock Wheelie King. I'll go over the modifications I've made so far. The first difference, and really the first modification that most people make on the Wheelie King, is the servo mount axle. Stock, the Wheelie King has the steering servo mounted on the rear of the chassis, up here, with a rod that goes to a central pivot that reverses the servo action through a belt crank in the center of the chassis, which then connects to a second rod which follows the front suspension arms to another pivot point on the front axle, and with a pivot arm that is bent 90 degrees connects to a tie rod that then finally connects to the steering knuckle. Did I mention that all these pieces are flexible plastic so they don't break? That works great for durability, but every plastic part of the steering linkage flexes when pressure is applied. That's really not so great when you want it to turn. So you end up with a lot of play in the steering, you get a lot of bump steer from slack in the steering, it's just a mess. The fix for all of that is to get rid of it. Change over to an axle mounted servo, and you just have the servo arm, the tie rod, and the steering knuckle. Less flex, less slop, no bump steer. My servo mount came from Billetworks Design, and I really think it's the best one out there. Hot Racing makes one, Level 3 RC makes one, and there are several designs available on some forums to make your own. But every other one I've used ends up getting bent. The reason I like Billetworks plate is, not only is it strong, but it can also be added onto, so you can mount all of your electronics on it if you want to turn it into a sportsman class crawler. But we're not going to be doing that, since what we're going to do is make the Wheelie King into a scaler. It seems easy, right? It's one of the oldest straight axle monster trucks outside of the Clogbuster, but I can't find anyone that has done it recently. Put the body back on here. When the Axial SCX-10 came out, there were ladder chassis you could buy and adapt to other trucks. But the Wheelie King wasn't very popular as a scale truck due to the square axle housings and the side mount transmission. The axles are kind of self-explanatory from an appearance standpoint, but the transmission might not be. The Wheelie King has a TVP, or twin vertical plate chassis, meaning it has two large pieces that make up each side of the frame, and all of the parts bolt in between them. A standard ladder chassis, like the SCX-10, has two rails and flat plates or brackets that mount in between them for the drivetrain and electronics to mount on top of. All of that means you can't bolt a Wheelie King transmission to a ladder chassis without modification. The links and link mounts on my truck are from a Crawler King, which gives it about a 2.5 inch longer wheelbase over the stock Wheelie King 9 inch wheelbase. I like to use my Wheelie King for crawling, so that helps stabilize it while climbing over rocks and steep hills. I added lockers from an Axial AX10 to help with crawling also, and they bolt right in. HPA makes them for this truck as well. If you're starting out with a Crawler King, then you already have the links, the link mounts, and the lockers, so you don't have to buy them separately, and you can use the Level 3 or RC or Hot Racing servo mount with the stock suspension arms. The Billetworks mount requires a changeover to a 4-link. To make it easier for people following along, we'll go ahead and use a Level 3 RC servo mount during our conversion. I have enough parts to build a couple of Wheelie Kings, so I'll be using those parts to do this build up. And after we get it running, we'll be adding modifications to improve performance, and then we'll compare it to our Wheelie King, or Crawler King at this point, to see how it does. Here you can see the difference between the Wheelie King and the Crawler King link mounts. The Wheelie King mount limits ground clearance by putting the link below the axle, where the Crawler link mount puts the link up and behind the axle almost half an inch higher. The shock mounts are different as well. The Wheelie King puts the shock over the top of the axle with only one mounting option, whereas the Crawler King gives multiple options and also makes it possible to mount the shock lower, allowing for a longer shock while at the same time keeping the longer travel. You can buy the link mounts and links from shops like Dollar Hobbies, or you can order the HPI part numbers I'll list below the video. We'll also be using Level 3 RC's LCG motor mount here to put the motor down lower and forward compared to the stock placement, which is up high over the top of the transmission. This will help with crawling and stability. So that's it for now, and the next time we'll start assembling the parts we have, go through some of the advantages of what we're doing to the truck, and making some decisions about tires, wheels, and a body. I hope you like this first video in a series, and if you do, give me a thumbs up to let me know that you'd like more videos like this in the future. I'll also be documenting this build on ultimaterc.com, and I'll include a link below as well. Thanks for watching.